Have you ever called a business and the bot sounded like a glitchy robot, so you just hung up? That same problem is costing agencies thousands of dollars in lost leads every single day. The truth is that 90% of those robot moments are just bad settings. Think about one wrong model choice here, an off voice temperature there, and suddenly your AI receptionist is talking over customers, it's burning tokens, and essentially it's shredding brand trust. In the next few minutes, I will hand you a plug and play blueprint, the exact Retell AI settings that I use to create smooth, natural, money making voice agents. You can copy paste these settings into your calls, and they will go from please hold to please bill. So if that sounds like the thing that you want to hear, this is the video for you. Let's dive right in. So first, let's speak about what exactly is Retell LLM, Retell AI, and why you should care. So think about this as the brain of your voice agent. And essentially, it's built from four parts. There's number one, the large language model itself. There's the function calls that let it take the action. There's the knowledge base that feeds it the facts. And there are the system prompts that tell it who it is and how to behave. And when you can nail all these four, your agents will sound like a friendly professional instead of a glitchy robot. So let's start with the model right here. And what we're going to do is essentially run everything on GPT models because these are some of the best that there are. And even more importantly, you get a flat sort of pricing. So no matter how big your prompt gets, it's reliable, it's predictable, and customers love the delivery. So in order to set that up, let's just create a new agent right here. Let's go with a short prompt agent. And this is the first place you will look for this model. So over here, you get to choose the model. There's a bunch of models that you can go for. So GPT-4o real time, GPT-4o mini, GPT-4o mini. There's the 4.1, which is also quite interesting, and the mini when it comes to pricing. Then you have Claude as well, which is more on the higher side. As you can see, 6 cents and 2 cents if it's the Claude Haiku. There's also the Gemini models as well, starting at a fraction of a cent, and the Flashlight, which is even half that. So there's a lot to choose from. Personally, I tend to go for GPT-4o, or nowadays even for GPT-4.1 as my first choice. So that's the first thing. The next thing that we should consider is to set this temperature for consistent on-script answers. And this will allow you to keep the structured outputs off and replies allow the replies to stay conversational. And one of these settings or some of these settings can be found here in the speed settings. So here you have the background sounds. So you can choose a coffee shop, convention hall, summer outdoor, mountain outdoor. Generally, I tend to go with none. And then if the client wants something different, then you can change that. There's also the background sound volume. So you can also adjust how low or how high that is. We have the responsiveness. So I don't see a reason why this should be anything other than 1, to be honest, in the sense that if you turn it all the way here, this will make the responsive very slow. And we have interruption sensitivity. So how sensitive AI can be interrupted by human speech. So if the AI is speaking and the person says something, how fast does the AI stop speaking? And generally, I tend to turn this up anywhere between 0.8 and 0.9. We have backchanneling, which enables the agent to use affirmations like yeah, aha, during conversations, indicating active listening and engagement. You can turn this on. Generally, I tend to turn that off by default. We have the frequency, and we also have a list of words that we can use for backchanneling right here. So these are different temperature settings, different things that you can enable when it comes to the models that you're choosing. Speaking of these models, we also need to figure out the voice, right? So over here, we have different companies, I guess, that we could use or plug in for our voices. The most popular are 11 Labs. There's also PlayHD. There's also the ability to use OpenAI, but in my opinion, this is very robotic sounding.
Welcome. Alloy at your service. Welcome. Alloy at your service, designed to simplify your tasks and answer your queries.
which then again has been getting better as well.
Hi, I'm Onyx, your digital friend, here to make your experience smoother and more enjoyable.
Then again, I think that 11 Labs have the best voices. There's also Play HD, which isn't half bad.
Hey, I'm your virtual assistant from Retell AI, here to help you handle all the calls.
I noticed this as I was playing with it the last time, Adrian. There's like that, it's not super clear on the back end, like there's something happening in the background.
Hey, I'm your virtual assistant from Retell AI, here to help you handle all the calls.
So, not bad in that case. I don't know if it's an Adrian thing right here. What I like about all these is that you have the ability to filter. So, male, female, accent, and types. If I go to 11 Labs, male, I get all accents. If I go to Australian, I can get a bunch of Australian, I don't know, middle-aged provider, right? So,
hello there. I'm Charlie, your virtual aide at your service to tackle obstacles and...
Hey there, meet Noah, your dedicated AI assistant shining a light on your challenges and offering smart solutions.
Yeah, I like Noah in terms of Australian accents. So anyway, we can just hit use voice and then this will be reflected up here. We can also choose the voice model. This is also super important. And over here, we get some additional settings for voice speed, voice temperature, and voice volume. So the temperature can be bumped up for emotional or bumped down for calm. So that it depends on the situation your agent is speaking in. We have the voice speed, so it can go 2x the speed or be very slow. And we have the voice volume. I guess in some situations it might make sense to bump this up all the way to 2.0. Then we have the voice model right here. And generally, I tend to keep this to 11 Labs Turbo V2. There are some issues with some of these, like 11 Labs Turbo 2.5. They work well most of the time. However, when they don't, you can run into issues right there. So generally, I tend to leave this to auto and choose 11 Labs Turbo V2 at this current stage. So this is in terms of the different settings that I would immediately pick out of the box. The next thing I want to speak about is the system prompt. And generally, I tend to break this up into 3 clean chunks. Number 1, it's the persona. So here we outline the roles, the skills, and the objective. So let's say something like you are Alex, you're a warm, knowledgeable project coordinator at this so-and-so company, which is an AI automation agency. So we're giving it specifics about who it is, what it does. Then we have the rules, where we essentially spell out what the agent must literally do and must never do. And I think this is super important. There's the 2 parts to the whole automation. There's the what you can do and what you can't or what you must not do. And I think most people tend to focus just on this route right here. But this is even, if not more important than the can. So here we give it examples of good things as well, right? Here we give it the examples of the bad stuff. Because if we're just providing this right here, it's very difficult for it to figure out whether something falls under this route if we're not specifying that. So I think that is super important and super key. When it comes to the rules, you can think of stuff like empathy, like no profanity, like no medical or legal advice, and so on and so forth. It all depends on what you are trying to get it to do, I guess. And then we have the third step, which is the steps to follow. So here you give the exact conversation flow that you want the agent to follow. For example, we start with something like we greet the person, and we can also specify how this is done. Then we say, let's discover the caller's automation needs if it's an AI agency. So then we have the discover stage. Then we might want to capture contact details. So again, I'm being very specific in terms of what I wanted to do and the steps I wanted to follow. And then maybe I say I want to, I don't know, offer the next steps, which might be scheduling. So like a call to action. Let's book a call. And then at the end, we might want to close the call with a friendly goodbye. So I'm being very literal. I'm being very specific. So first you greet them, then you discover what their problems are, then you capture their information, then you invite them to book a call, and then you say goodbye. Let's speak next time. So very specific: step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Here I will, or you can also, I guess, write it down. You can save it as a template, and then with every new client within the same industry, you have the template that's ready to plug in that actually works. So it makes sense to spend the time to invest the time to build this out and have it working the way that you want, because then you can repeat it for similar or for the same niche. And then client setups drops from literally hours to minutes with every next client. Now, let's speak about the other settings that are available right here, because each of these settings will have an impact on the final output. So we looked at the speed settings right here. What is important here is also the call settings. And one thing that I learned my lesson, I guess, from was this end call on silence and max call duration. So what I was doing was I was getting 2 voice agents to test, or to get one agent to test the other voice agent. If I had to draw that out, what that looked like is that I had, let me just freeze this. So I had, let's call this guy agent 1. And then I had, if I change the color here, let's go, oops, and say this is agent 2. Let's just zoom out here. And I had, let's say agent 1 is the caller and agent 2 is kind of my agent, right? So, so this is the caller and this is my agent. So the caller calls my agent and has a conversation. My agent then replies to the caller and then the caller says something else. So you have this back and forth chain of agent to caller, which essentially is still 2 agents speaking to each other, right? However, since I had this by default enabled, or I left it to the default settings, the max call duration by default here is 1 hour, as you can see. And there was no silence on my call, so this doesn't come into play. There was no 10 minutes of silence. And yeah, let's just say I ended up getting billed quite a bit because of that mistake. So as you are testing, as you are building, especially, ensure that something like this right here, this max call duration, you're aware of. So I would bump this down to, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, if that's as long as it takes. And then you can increase it as you are getting people to test, as you figure out exactly how long the average call should take. And yeah, just wanted to bring this up. And if this is interesting in terms of setting up these tests between 2 agents as well, so you can test in bulk and you can really figure out how this, or whether this is actually working, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video on that as well. Anyway, so these are important settings that you must know about. And by default, what I do is, as I said, end call on silence, I just leave it to 10 seconds, because if 2 people or 2 agents or 1 AI agent, 1 person aren't speaking for 10 seconds, right here, I don't see the point of this keeping on going. We get the max call duration. So I generally turn this down as well to a few minutes. So I wouldn't necessarily leave it to 1 minute. And what you will notice here, once you add some information, is that the max call duration goes up to, or the minimum gets increased. So here we have nothing. So this can be a maximum of 1 minute. But when we have more information here, this generally increases to a higher minimum allowed right here. We have the pause before speaking, which generally I would leave as is. And then we have the ring duration. In my case, this I generally leave to the default settings right here. Then we have the post-call analysis, which can be its own video, to be honest, because there's all that you can do there, but it's not really about settings. We have the security and fallback settings, which can be useful right here. So one thing I generally look into is this fallback voice ID. And here it says, if the current voice provider fails, assign a fallback voice to continue the call. And this is useful because if there's a problem with, I don't know, OpenAI, if there's a problem with PLHT, if there's a problem with 11 labs, you don't want that your whole scenario doesn't work. You want it to revert to something or to go to something that is actually working. So by default here, if I make this choice, I have 11 labs as the main voice, which we've set to be Noah. But then I can also set the fallback voice ID to something like PlayHT, and then I choose, I don't know, Andrew.
Hey, I'm your virtual assistant from Retell AI, here to help you handle all the calls.
So now, if Noah fails from 11 labs, Andrew will kick in. And we can also have the default dynamic variable. So here I can set fallback values for dynamic variables across all endpoints if they are not provided. So this is very useful in the case that, I don't know, let's say that we're initiating outbound calls. So we have a list in Google Sheets in our table that we're using to call people. And maybe in some cases we don't have their website assigned. So in that case, you can set the variable value of the site to be empty. So when the agent is speaking, there's not something that's clearly wrong. We can also set that up in the system prompt. However, there are many different ways how you could set this up, and it is very useful to know that the settings exist right here. In terms of other settings, there's the webhook settings. So there's also this inbound call webhook URL, and as you can see here, this has been migrated to phone level webhook. So as far as I have been testing, this has been pretty useless right here, because once you put something in here, I believe I was getting like an error, yeah, and please change to phone level webhook. So I'm not sure why what this is still doing here. What is super useful is this agent level webhook URL. So this is the webhook to receive events from Retell. And what I've currently been doing is I set the webhook URL here and the function webhook right here to be the same thing. And then in my NA10 or in my make.com scenario, I have different routes that allows me to go up one route or down another depending on the thing that gets called. So if here I have a custom function that is called check time, I don't know, for example, then in the URL, you put in your webhook, and then in make.com, you actually get that the function that was called check time. Then at the end, when you get the post call analysis, you get that labeled properly as well. So you get post call analysis. So there's a lot that you can do with this as well. I just don't like to have multiple webhooks. I find it makes the whole scenario very complex very quickly. So I would rather have one webhook, and then once the data is in make or in NA10, then I can filter it and send it down the right route. So let me see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, so a few other things in terms of settings. If we look here at the speech settings, there is this enable speech normalization. So this converts text elements like numbers, currency, and dates into human-like spoken forms. And generally, I tend to turn this on. So it doesn't, or it reads this as it should when it comes to transcribing and actually understanding this. As you can see, though, this adds a bit of latency, which is 100 milliseconds to the whole call setup. However, I think it's a worthwhile sort of setting to have enabled right here. And as you can see, once you add this up right here, so if it's disabled, we have 5570 to 5900. I turn this on and this increases right there. Okay. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, another important thing is I kind of alluded to this here, which is the end of call function. So this is one thing that I always have in my voice agents. So over here, end call, and it's as simple as giving the agent the ability to end the call right there. In terms of functions here, there's a few inbuilt ones as well. So there's the call transfer, there's the press digit, which can be useful if you need the agent to press dial tones, and you can check different calendar availability and also book. So if you use cal.com, this allows you to connect with the API key and make the booking or the checking of available times very, very seamless. Then again, when it comes to functions, there's a lot that you can do here. So you just add a custom function, you connect it to a webhook, and it's pretty much good to go very quickly. You have some examples right here in terms of JSON that you can also, or that you should also model on. So you have whatever it is you're passing to the webhook, and you're just saying whether this is required or not. So in this case, we're passing the appointment available timestamp, we're giving it a description, and we're saying this is required to be passed to the webhook that would go right here. So in a way, it's pretty straightforward, and I like how Retell have set that up. Now, let me just pinpoint a few common pitfalls that you should avoid. Some of these will be recaps of what I just said, but I think it's good to go over these one more time. So number one, use Turbo V2, not 2.5, until the glitches are ironed out, because you don't want an agent that doesn't work some of the time. Number two is interrupt sensitivity. I would test this. I said I would put it around 0.8, 0.9. Then again, in your case, it might be a bit too much if it's interrupting, or if as soon as someone speaks, the agent immediately stops speaking. So that is one thing I would test as well. Personally, I like to do it so that it will cut off quickly, but that is just a personal setting or a personal preference. The next thing is to always enable transcript reformatting or phone numbers that turn to timestamps, because or rather, if you don't, you'll get these phone numbers that turn to timestamps. So I think it's a good setting to enable. The next is to keep call recordings unless your client or your industry forbids it, because there's a lot that you can learn, that you can understand, that you can improve based on these call transcripts or call recordings as well. And they're also good for quality assurance at the same time. So the quick recap is model, voice, prompts, and also guardrails. When you can dial these four and really get them to do the things that you want them to do, essentially you own the conversation, and everything else after that is pretty much garnish. So if you're ready to deploy, check out the links in the description so you can see how I can help you with this voice AI agent as well. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future ones. And if you want to see something specific when it comes to voice AI agents or AI agents in general, let me know in the comments, so I'll look into what type of content to create next. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon.